Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. It all started with a simple Craigslist post, one I had no business answering, but the words drew me in like a moth to a flame. I had just moved into a new apartment, one of those cheap, run-down places that had seen better days. Furniture was scarce, and I was on a tight budget. So when I saw an ad for a free couch, I didn't think twice. The post was short. Too short, really, but the picture was clear enough. A worn, oversized couch with faded cushions, and the caption said, "No questions asked, just take it away." There was something almost too generous about it. No strings attached, just a free couch. It sounded like a gift, like a dream come true. Maybe it was the excitement of a new apartment. Maybe it was just my desperation, but I felt an instant connection to that couch. It wasn't beautiful or stylish. It was just there, waiting to be taken. I messaged the seller immediately. The reply came just hours later. A man in his late 40s gave me the address, along with a note. "Come by anytime. It's in the living room." Something about the tone of the message felt off. It wasn't warm or friendly or even professional. It was just direct, but I pushed the feeling aside. It was a free couch. How bad could it be? I arrived at the house late in the afternoon. The sun had dipped low in the sky, casting everything in a dim, golden light. The house looked old, almost forgotten, like it was clinging to life but had long since given up hope of being remembered. The windows were grimy, the paint peeling, and the lawn had long since turned into a patchy mess of dry grass and weeds. But the lights were on inside, so I rang the doorbell. It took a moment, but then the door creaked open, and there he was, the man who had posted the couch. He was tall, gaunt, with long, greasy hair that hung like a curtain around his face. His eyes, though, were the strangest part. They were too wide, too bright, almost like they were reflecting something that shouldn't be reflected. His grin was unsettling, stretching too far across his face, like it belonged to someone else. "Come on in," he said, his voice low and rough. "The couch is just through here." I hesitated for a moment, but stepped inside. The entryway smelled of old wood and stale air. It felt cold, too cold for a house that had the lights on, but I ignored it, telling myself it was just an old house. There was nothing strange about that. He led me down the hallway, and that's when I saw it, the couch. It was sitting in the middle of the living room, big and bulky. The cushions were stained, with dark spots that I couldn't quite make out. It was almost comical how out of place it seemed in the otherwise clean space. I felt a wave of unease rush over me, but I quickly dismissed it. It was a free couch. What was I complaining about? "I'll just grab a few things from the other room," the man said, suddenly breaking the silence. His voice was quiet, too quiet, like he was trying to make himself as small as possible, as if he didn't want to be noticed. I stood there, alone in the living room with the couch, and that's when it hit me, the silence. It wasn't normal. It was too quiet, like everything around me had been swallowed up by the house. No ticking clocks, no hum of a fridge, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. The house felt empty, hollow, even though the man had been there a second ago. I glanced around, trying to shake the feeling of unease crawling up my spine. The walls were covered with strange, mismatched paintings, nothing that belonged together. Each one seemed to stare back at me, as if they knew something I didn't. I shook my head, trying to ignore it. Then, there was a noise, a faint shuffle behind me. My heart jumped in my chest. I spun around, expecting to see the man, but there was no one. Just the empty hallway. The air felt thicker now, heavier. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I moved closer to the couch, unsure of what to do. I knew I couldn't take it alone. The couch was too big, too heavy. My hands trembled as I gripped one of the cushions, ready to start dragging it out the door. That's when he appeared again, just as quietly as before. His eyes were locked onto me, watching with a strange, unsettling intensity. In his hands, he was holding something small, wrapped in fabric. "Don't forget to take the cushion," he said, his voice now uncomfortably calm. The cushion wasn't for the couch, though. It wasn't one of the mismatched cushions that sat haphazardly on the sofa. This one was different. It was smaller, folded carefully, and something about it felt wrong. It felt too alive, like it was holding something I didn't want to see, something I didn't want to touch. I opened my mouth to ask what it was, but the words wouldn't come. I felt a cold, sharp dread twist in my gut. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there with that same, too wide grin plastered on his face, waiting for me to take it. I wanted to run. I should have run, but I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, like the weight of the house itself was pressing down on me. The silence in the room grew unbearable. I couldn't stay. I couldn't leave the couch, and I couldn't leave the man. Without thinking, I dropped the couch and grabbed the door handle. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the fading light of evening. The air felt cool against my skin, but it didn't help calm the pounding in my chest. I didn't look back as I ran to my car, slamming the door behind me. The man's voice echoed in my head. "Don't forget the cushion," but I didn't care. I didn't want to know what was inside that cushion. I didn't want to know what would happen if I had taken it. I never went back to Craigslist again, and I never thought about that couch again until now. But even now, when I close my eyes at night, I see the man's face, and I hear that voice, and I wonder if maybe the house wasn't empty after all. I wonder if it's still waiting. Story 2. I had just moved to a new city for work, and everything felt like a whirlwind. I was alone, miles away from home, and my apartment search had been less than successful. I needed a place fast, somewhere cheap and close to my new job. That's when I stumbled upon the ad. It was a room for rent in a quiet neighborhood. The rent was dirt cheap, especially for the area. The photos were pristine, an immaculate house with a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The kind of place you could imagine yourself coming home to after a long day. A quick scroll through the listing, and I was sold. It had to be a mistake, right? Who rents out a room this nice for so little? I messaged the number listed in the ad. The response came fast, and a voice on the other end of the line introduced himself as Jerry. "Hi, I'm Jerry," he said in a deep, calm voice. "I have the room available, and I think you'll love it. Come by today, and we can talk details." It seemed too good to be true, but I was desperate. I agreed and set out to meet him that evening. The house was in a quiet, almost forgotten part of town, tucked away on a narrow street. The houses here looked like something out of a storybook. Old, weathered, but with charm. When I knocked on the door, Jerry opened it almost immediately. He was tall, dressed in a crisp button-up shirt, and he had a smile that was just a bit too wide, like a salesman trying to close a deal. His handshake was firm, and he greeted me like an old friend. "Come on in," he said, stepping aside to let me through. The interior of the house matched the photos perfectly. Polished hardwood floors, soft lighting, clean and well kept. It smelled faintly of pine, like someone had just finished cleaning. Jerry led me through the living room, where the furniture was stylish but simple, nothing too extravagant. "This is the place," Jerry said, motioning to a cozy little sitting area. "It's all yours if you decide to take it." He asked if I wanted a drink, but I politely declined. I wasn't sure what it was, but something about the way he kept offering me snacks and drinks started to make my skin crawl. It wasn't normal. It was like he wanted me to feel at home, maybe too much. We chatted for a while. He told me how much he loved having people stay with him, how peaceful the house was, and how long he'd lived there. The more he spoke, the more I began to feel unsettled, as though he was trying too hard to sell me something that didn't quite feel right. His eyes were always on me, watching, like he was waiting for me to say yes. Finally, he led me upstairs to the room. It was beautiful, big, bright windows that let in the afternoon light, a massive bed in the center of the room. The kind of room that made you think you could sleep soundly for hours without a care in the world. It was perfect, just like the ad promised. But as I looked around, I saw something that made my stomach tighten with unease. The closet door was slightly ajar. I didn't know why, but I felt drawn to it, like there was something I was supposed to see. I slowly walked toward it and peeked inside. On a shelf, there sat an old, weathered mirror. It was an antique, framed in dark wood with intricate carvings. But that wasn't what caught my attention. What caught my attention was the reflection of Jerry. He was standing behind me, his face blank and emotionless, staring directly at the mirror. I could see it clear as day, but when I turned around, he was still standing there, talking casually about how much he loved the house. My heart raced. I was frozen in place for a moment, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The reflection, it wasn't right. It wasn't like any normal reflection. There was something wrong with it. And Jerry, the way he was acting now, it felt rehearsed. Too perfect. "I think I need to go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you sure?" he asked, not missing a beat. "It's such a great place. I can't imagine you would find anything better." I smiled weakly, tried to keep my voice calm. "Yeah, I think I need to think about it. It's been a long day." As I made my way down the stairs, I felt a chill creep up my spine. At the bottom of the stairs, something caught my eye, a set of shoes sitting in the corner by the door. They were old, mud-stained, and looked like they'd been there for ages. But they didn't belong to Jerry. I was sure of it. I froze in place for a second, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But before I could think too much about it, Jerry appeared beside me. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice smooth but with something darker hidden underneath. I think I'll pass on the room," I muttered, stepping back toward the door. "Thanks for showing me." Jerry nodded, his smile never faltering, but his eyes seemed colder now, like he was sizing me up. I quickly left, the door closing softly behind me, but that strange feeling never left. As I sat in my car, I tried to shake the unease. It wasn't until I pulled away from the house that I realized how tightly my hands were gripping the steering wheel. I never went back. I never found out what was in that closet or who those shoes belonged to. But I didn't need to. I knew I had just barely escaped something dark and twisted, something that had been waiting for someone like me. The ad for the room was gone the next day, but that wasn't the part that kept me up at night. It was the way Jerry had looked at me, like he knew I was going to walk out the door, like he had planned it all along. And the reflection, his reflection, staring back at me, emotionless and cold, still haunted me. I found another place to stay, but every time I close my eyes, I can still see that mirror, and in it, I see him, waiting. Story 3. It was an innocent enough search. My best friend, Jess, and I had just moved into our first apartment together. Small, but cozy, and we needed some furniture. A couch, a coffee table, a few quirky pieces of decor to make the place feel like home. We scrolled through Craigslist like everyone else, looking for bargains, trying to make our tiny space a little more ours. It was there that we stumbled upon the ad. Haunted Victorian mirror, $1.20. The description was brief but chilling. This mirror comes from a Victorian house that's been abandoned for years. It has a history. Don't ask too many questions. Price is firm. No returns. Buyer assumes all responsibility. I remember Jess snorting. Haunted? Yeah, right, she said, tapping the screen of my phone with her long fingers. Who would sell a haunted mirror? The price was ridiculous, too good to pass up. A large, ornate mirror for $20? We figured if it was fake, it'd make for a cool story to tell at parties. I'd always been a skeptic, a bit too logical for my own good. And Jess, she loved anything weird, loved a good horror story, even if she didn't believe in ghosts. Without a second thought, I texted the number listed. We arranged to meet the seller that afternoon. The woman who opened the door was nothing like I expected. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, her clothes loose and faded, her skin pale and paper thin. She had an odd smile, one that didn't quite match the twinkle in her eyes. Her hair was pinned up tightly, but a few strands had escaped, wisps of gray that framed her face like a ghost's halo. You must be here for the mirror, she said, her voice raspy, as if she'd been speaking in whispers for years. She stepped aside, and I followed her into the house. It was dark, not because the sun had set, it was early afternoon, but because the curtains were drawn tight, blocking out any light. The house smelled faintly of mildew and something else I couldn't place. I was about to ask more about the mirror when she turned and placed her hands on it, as if caressing its surface. "You're sure you want this one?" she asked, looking over her shoulder at me. "You must take care of it." I raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jess, who was already taking in the details of the room, her curiosity piqued by the strange woman. I laughed it off. "Yeah, it's just a mirror. Looks nice. Doesn't seem haunted to me." The woman's smile widened. Too wide, too strange, and she handed me the mirror. "Take care of it," she repeated, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "Don't look too closely into it. It might look back." I swallowed hard, trying to laugh it off, but there was something about her words, the way they hung in the air long after she spoke, that fell off. But we paid her, took the mirror, and left. That night, we hung the mirror in the living room, where the light from the windows would hit it just right. It was beautiful, with intricate carvings around the edges, like something out of a mansion from the 1800s. The glass shimmered in the dim light, and for a moment I thought, yeah, it was worth it. We sat down on a couch, chatting about our day, about the unpacking we still had to do, when I saw it. At first, it was subtle, a shifting of shadows in the reflection. It was just the dim lighting, I thought. I turned to Jess, trying to brush it off, but when I looked back at the mirror, my stomach dropped. There, in the reflection, behind us was a figure. Tall, dark, almost featureless except for the eyes. The eyes were glowing, sickly, yellow like old, decayed teeth. They were fixed on us, piercing through the glass like they could see us better than we could see them. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. There was nothing behind us. The room was empty, save for the two of us and the mirror. I must have stared for a few moments too long. I could feel Jess's eyes on me, but I didn't say anything, just trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had lodged in my chest. It's probably just the lighting, I muttered, but the unease never quite left. The next few days were worse. Every night, it felt like the shadows in the corners of the room were moving. The silence would press down on us, suffocating, and then we'd hear it, a soft, barely audible sound. Footsteps, moving slowly, deliberately, like someone was walking through the room when no one else was there. It was always when the lights dimmed, or when we were alone. At first, we thought it was just the house settling or the pipes making noise. But then, Jess swore she saw it again, the figure standing in the mirror. She described it to me, every detail, as if it were happening right in front of her. Tall, shadowed, with the same glowing eyes, its presence almost palpable. I didn't believe her, but every time I passed by the mirror, I felt it, something watching me, always watching, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, one night, we were sitting on the couch, flipping through channels. The mirror caught my eye again, and my breath hitched. The figure in the glass was moving closer, its hands slowly reaching out. The distortion was so vivid. The glass warped like it was melting, the edges blurring like smoke. "Jess, look," I whispered, my voice tight with panic. Jess turned to look at the mirror, her face draining of color. "Oh God, it's coming toward us." In that instant, the figure's hand reached out of the mirror. No longer a reflection, something from the other side, solidifying, materializing, moving through the glass as though it were real. I jumped to my feet, my heart racing as I bolted out of the apartment, grabbing Jess by the wrist. She followed, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. We didn't stop running until we were out in the street, the door of the apartment still wide open behind us. We never went back. I can't explain it. Was it the mirror itself? Or something else, something darker, attached to it? I don't know, but I'm not going back to find out. The Craigslist ad disappeared the next day, just like the mirror. And the house where we met the woman, I drove by it a week later, only to find it abandoned. No sign of life. No one had lived there for years. But sometimes late at night, I still see the eyes. In the corner of my vision, I catch the faintest reflection, always watching. And now I wonder, what happened to the mirror after we left? Who took it? And if it's out there, waiting, what happens when it finds its next owner?